Welcome to the weekend. We are waking up with watches. Incredible splendor on the table today, and everything is for sale. Remember, prices in the description below, along with names and references, plus tmosso at thewatchbox.com, the direct pricing and purchase question email to you from me, for my hand-picked crew, any inquiry about any watch in real time. tmosso at thewatchbox.com. Let's start off with some sensational pieces. The big three of Lange Zeitwerk. Crossing the border to Saxony, we head over to Eastern Germany and the ancestral lands of glass blowing and watchmaking. This is the Lange 1, one of the original 4 modern-day Lange models launched at Dresden Castle back in 1994. This is the original size, 38.5 millimeters, with a lovely black chocolate dial. It has elements of dark chocolate to it, a little bit of a brown, and a strength to it. Metallic, as you can see, azurage, or a sort of concentric guilloche for the registers, and then a satin finish for that black-brown base of the dial. Now, the dial itself is made of sterling silver, and it should be noted that the timepiece, all of gold with a silver dial, let's see if we can get that in focus right there, it is absolutely imposing for a 38.5 millimeter watch because of the heft of the case. Now, of course, let's just quickly jump it through the danger zone, make sure we're not in the changeover. Oh, we were. It's a good thing we didn't jump the date right there. There is a pusher adjuster for the double-digit date, or the panorama datum, and it's a wonderful feel, like a fine column wheel chronograph. As you can see on the case back, German silver or nickel copper zinc for the original caliber L90, and you can see that it features a 3/4 bridge with jewels, pivot jewels, set in screw-fixed golden chaton. All of the screws that you can see in the chaton are fired blue, and then we also have black polished screws for adjustment of the black polished swan's neck regulator, as well as the case clamp. Now you can see the access ports inside the 3/4 bridge, as well as the edge of every beveled bridge, with a mirrored rounded anglage or mirrored chamfer, and a freehand engraved half bridge for the balance. 3-day power reserve, 2 mainspring barrels. You've got the double-digit date, and you've got the power reserve over on the corner of the dial. Throw it on the wrist at 38.5. It is a universally wearable size. Not too broad across the wrist. I also consider the 38.5 millimeter case to be a unisex option. I don't see any reason to go down to the 36.5 millimeter Little Lange. That's a wonderful piece, but I think you really need a truly petite, almost childlike wrist to wear this. Any woman, any man can wear this model with an easy fit, especially across the wrist. It's also low on the wrist, so it fits well under a cuff. Now we're continuing our tour of Saxony. I mentioned a fine column wheel chronograph, and we have one here today. The original 39 millimeter Datograph. This is a model that I believe was launched in approximately 2003-2004 with a lovely rose gold case and a silver dial. Now the dial has been galvanized silver, but it too is also of sterling silver underneath. You can see the stepped up flange for the tachometer. It is a flyback chronograph, and you can see the reset and the restart with a single push of the trigger down at 4 o'clock. Sunken registers, note they are just below the cannon pinion of the hand at center, so they are dropped down somewhat to counterbalance the panorama datum up at 12 o'clock. Of course, this one also features the pusher adjuster for the double-digit date. Note that the Alpha-style hands are loomed. Turn it all over, and this is where the legend of modern Lange Zeitwerk really started. In 1999, when this movement, the L951, bowed at Basel and instantly reset expectations for modern-day high horology watch finish. A fully jeweled lateral clutch, satin finished in steel with beveled edges. You can see the column wheel capped and black polished, interacting with the satin finished levers and horns. And you can see that as I draw the clutch out of contact, I drop the recentering hammers and re-zero everything on the dial side. Overcoil hairspring, 5-position adjustment, 18,000 vibration per hour balance. Note the swan's neck, black polished once more, and we have bridges likewise in that nickel copper zinc Major or German silver. Note that there are still a few jewels set in chaton, and no fewer than 5, possibly even 6 interior angles with the sharp inward cleft of the bevel on the chronograph clutch alone. Throw it on the wrist, 39 millimeters wears well. You can see it's a handsome, almost vintage-inspired watch, as it seems to live somewhere between the eras of the pocket watch and the wristwatch, and that's appropriate, as East German watchmaking was collectivized in the early 1950s, and for most of the 20th century, as well as all of its 19th century history, German watchmaking meant pocket watches, so the modern Lange und Söhne reaches back to that heritage, both on the movement side and the dial side, creating a watch that does feel like a hybrid of those two great eras of German watchmaking. We've had the Lange 1, we've had the Datograph, but where is the Zeitwerk? Well, let me answer your question. The big three in rose gold each. This is the Zeitwerk, the watch that won the GPHG Aigle d'Or back in 2009, the grand prize. Power reserve, jumping minutes, tens of minutes, and hours. Let's cut to the chase. Boom, just like that, digital jumping, 42 millimeters in rose gold. Winding this spring is one of the great tactile pleasures in watch ownership because it almost feels like you're cranking an early 1900s car. So strong is that spring, but the detent and the click are sublime. Now you can see part of the movement on the dial side. This is actually a German silver time bridge, and what you're looking at here is actually a clear sapphire. So the pivot for these two discs is actually right there, it's visible. This is part of the movement right here. You have stop seconds, you have a quick set function for the time, and of course the power reserve. The dial, with the exception of the time bridge, is also in sterling silver. We're going to turn it over and take a look at the movement. One side of the mainspring is actually hooked to the base plate of the movement. The other side is inside the barrel, and it actually drives by aggressing against the base plate, which anchors the spring and helps to contain its immense force. There is a black polished stopworks that is designed to stop the motion of the watch when it no longer has enough energy to jump the minutes. Now there is a pinwheel air brake built into the transfer from the crown. You can see the crown wheel, the reduction system, the barrel with the Maltese stopworks. There's a pinwheel underneath the beginning of the bridge, and then there is a second locking lever, and it is a pallet with twin jewels that actually impulses the double third wheel with a hairspring between them, and that hairspring is the remontoir d'égalité, the constant force device. So the power goes from that constant force spring to the balance. The barrel never directly drives the balance, so that avoids overdriving the escapement when it's fully wound and underdriving the escapement as it winds down. You could see the freehand engraving not just on the balance cock, but also on the escape wheel cock adjacent, which also features a black polished cap. As good as it gets, east or west, this is the best. Throw it on the wrist. 42 millimeters makes for a large Lange, but not an oversized watch by any contemporary standard. It's thicker than the other two, but not exceptionally so. And as you can see, it has a reasonable span across the wrist of approximately 50 millimeters. So on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, this one wears easily. And I would say down to 14.5 centimeters, you're going to wear this watch well. The rose gold does give it a warmth that is lacking on the conventional white gold and platinum models. So for a lot of folks, that would be the perfect three-piece Lange und Söhne collection. Now let's allow Patek Philippe, the great rival to Lange of Geneva, to post a riposte, and that in the form of the 2014 Nautilus Travel Time Chronograph, 40.5 millimeters in diameter and exceptionally only about 12.6, 12.7 millimeters thick. It's not as chunky as it looks. The timepiece features a travel time complication that is perfectly integrated into the conventional winglets of the Gerald Genta design case. Now you can see there is a second time zone with a skeleton hand hidden underneath the primary, and you can close it up and cover that second hand when you don't require a second time zone. You have AM/PM indicators for both local and reference time. Most watches with a GMT function or dual time function are only going to have AM/PM for the reference time. You've got a radial date, and of course you have a nice balance to the dial because the date counteracts the constant, or I should say rather the chronograph minutes down at the bottom. Constant seconds is delivered in the form of the chronograph, which is to say the watch doesn't actually have a constant seconds hand, but because of the vertical clutch system, you can leave the center seconds running. And though it doesn't feature a zero reset or hacking function, if you just want to treat center seconds as your hours, minutes, and seconds of the day, your running seconds, you could just use the flyback function of the watch to reset after you set the time. You'll note the lateral striations here in an anthracite, a little bit more silver at the center, darker, almost black at the edge, and you can see that there are white gold indices, white gold hands, plenty of lume, still 120 meters water resistant in spite of the through fittings. The timepiece wears easily on the wrist. My wrist, once again, 16 centimeters circumference, and this timepiece is perfectly fit to my wrist. It's somewhere between the fit of the 5711 and the 5726. The annual calendar feels almost like a Nautilus offshore, bigger, chunkier, with a more massive case and bracelet, whereas the traditional 5711 feels thinner, more delicate. The 5712 has the same feeling, and the 5990 is somewhere between the 5726 and the thinner, traditional 5711. So this is an easy watch to wear, and you can see it's not high on the wrist. It even has a sloping side, so it will fall underneath the cuff. Now this is an unbelievable timepiece in every regard, and you can see the traditional high horology finish on the back of the case. This is the CH28520. It is a 55-hour power reserve, vertical clutch, column wheel, automatic winding, flyback chronograph with the dual time functionality. My favorite detail here is the perlage on the center of the rotor in a wonderful Nautilus-like spiral pattern. Stainless steel, discontinued, and highly sought. Pardon me, that watch is not discontinued. This watch is discontinued. Sorry folks, it's a little bit of a battle today, but we're looking at perhaps the most loved Vacheron sports watch of all time. The stainless steel blue dial, strap-clad, Overseas Chronograph Generation 2. Now this is a watch, as you can see, that is all about that lacquered blue dial. Note the chapter rings for the sub-registers are polished, and you can see that little glint and gleam on the polished rings of the registers. Also note that the minutes register is asymmetrical. It's larger to make it easier to read. Now the watch is 42 millimeters in stainless steel, and you can see that the lugs themselves profile sharply downward at their edge, which means this watch is an absolute cinch to wear on a smaller wrist, and it's not as thick as you'd think. Under 13 millimeters thick. It's comparable to the Nautilus, but it actually sits lower because the case back is cupped. So on the wrist, you can see it is very low cut. And you'll also appreciate the fact that the strap is held on by screws and bars. So it's far more tenacious than spring bars, and you're less likely to experience a disaster as the screws and bars can't spontaneously give up the way spring bars can. Frederic Piguet 1185 inside doing business as Vacheron caliber 1137. The nice thing about this watch is that is a high horology vertical clutch column wheel, 21.6 beat rate, double-digit date, 5-position adjusted, hand-finished movement from manufacturer Blancpain. The watch also features extravagant detailing on its caseback, albeit not in the form of a display caseback. You can see the Italian naval training vessel Amerigo Vespucci and quadruple finish satin on the outside, sunburst on the intermediate, and then inboard polish for the vessel and the waves, and a frosted media blasted base. There's a soft iron inner cage for 25,000 ampere per meter anti-magnetism and 150 meter water resistance. Though you can't see the movement, take my word for it. It is high horology, integrated, automatic, and very, very nicely finished. A timepiece that is all, however, about its dial. And this watch comes across as more athletic than the Generation 3 because there's a better match between the width of the lugs and the width of the strap, as well as the slender profile imparted by mounting the bezel directly to the case top. If you look at the 3rd generation chronograph, there's a circular plinth underneath the Maltese cross motif bezel. Now this is a well-loomed watch, so it is full-service sports. It's also graceful enough and thin enough, being a Vacheron, that you can use it for dress attire. That said, this would be a better match, and this is my favorite of the Generation 3 Overseas. The best balance, the balance of power shifting to the self-winding. The chronograph was the watch to have for the 2nd generation. For the 3rd generation, it's the basic automatic, and I'm going to remove my fingerprints here, but you can see this is the 2018 upgrade dial. The black lacquer, which has a lovely glossy gleam, forgive my fingerprints here, but you can see that plinth I spoke of, that circular base underneath the bezel. On the chronograph version of this watch, it's a bit overpowering. Here it's a bit better balanced. As you can see, it is a slender watch, under 12 millimeters thick, and we still use screws and bars. As you can see, there is also a brilliant quick release system. You can see the bar is built in, and a quick release lug latches directly to the bar. Now the nice thing about this is the watch comes with 2 accessory straps, one in black leather, one in black rubber, with an extra deployant clasp to mount directly to them. This is the first Overseas to feature both an in-house caliber and a display caseback. It goes without saying, being modern Vacheron, it is a Geneva hallmark movement, but note the Geneva hallmark on the case as well, as since 2012 this is now a full watch standard. Now the timepiece is remarkably rich, and as you can see, with a 22 karat rotor, triple finished, featuring an engraved compass rose pattern. This is beautifully executed, and I should mention, you're not shorting yourself the resistances, as a paramagnetic ring maintains the same anti-magnetism as the soft iron full cage of the second generation, and it's still 150 meters water resistant. Geneva hallmark at its best, as well as a modern sports watch through and through. Turn it over and you can see this watch, which is 41 millimeters, has a wonderful proportion about it, and nowhere is that more evident than on the dial. I particularly like the glossy chapter ring orejo that provides a nice slope down from the bezel to the dial base, and the cantilevered white gold indices for the hours that extend out over the center dial. Plenty of lume here, by the way. Now, throwing this one back on its bracelet, let's take a quick look at the bracelet because it's a highlight of the watch. Vacheron makes this watch fit. As you could see, every individual link on both sides of the bracelet is removable, so you will find the precise size. You can also see that there is a quick adjustment built in, approximately 1.5 millimeters on both sides of the deployant clasp. So you have the ability to make many adjustments, macro and micro, and that's without even fitting one of the straps. And I'm going to show you how easy it is to remount this bracelet on the overseas self-winding. Just like this, I'm putting the watch back together. Now this is great for obviously swapping out straps, but it's also wonderful if you want to clean the watch. And that is one of the benefits of every quick release lug system. It does make deep cleaning of your case a lot easier. Low slung, elegant, sleek, and at 41 millimeters, the perfect size. At 150 meters water resistant, this is more water resistant than any high horology sports watch other than the Royal Oak Offshore Diver, and this is infinitely more versatile than that monolith on your wrist. Handsome, and possibly the best version of this watch. I'm not sure. I go back and forth between this version and the brown dial. Now let's talk about a blue dial, one of the best of all time. This is a timepiece that we don't discuss often enough. It was part of the Omega comeback of the 1990s, and it was launched in 1993. This is the Seamaster Chronograph, 41.5 millimeters in stainless steel. You can see it features the matte blue Omega Wave dial with that alternation between gloss and matte finish to pop against the reflection of the light. Now you'll also note the presence of the so-called James Bond skeleton hands for hours and minutes, and a lovely polished steel bezel insert with blue lacquer for all the calibrations. It also features shouldered chronograph pushers, so while they look like screw downs, they are not. They're there for bolstering and as shear guards, so you can always actuate this chronograph without having to play with screw down pushers. Still 300 meters water resistant, still with the helium escape valve, and still with the clasp and bracelet that forced Rolex to rethink its clasp and bracelet standards during the 90s. You've got the all or nothing machine fold out, you've got the clasp milled from a single ingot of steel, and of course you've got the swing arm that's built to match. With a twin trigger deployant system, it feels infinitely more refined and substantial than the stamped Oyster clasps of the 1990s. This watch was a leader then, and it remains a classic to this day. As you can see, though it looks immense, on my wrist, 41.5 millimeters proves to be far more wearable, as I have plenty of clearance on both sides, and in fact I own the standard Diver 300 meter version of this watch. It is also a wonderful chronometer caliber, and it's a 7750 in chronometer spec, so you're getting movement that is both exacting in its precision and incredibly tough. People like to see the case backs even when they're not displayed. You can see the image of the Geneva wave on the back, as well as the hippocampus or the seahorse. This is a legendary version of a legendary model line. That said, going back to the future, let's talk about the 25th anniversary version of this same model family. Going back to the essential 300 meter three-hand and date, this is the 42 2018, 42 millimeters 2018 version. A lot changed from the originals. First, you could see, compared to the original GoldenEye model, by the way, the GoldenEye watch was a quartz. It wasn't until the last three Brosnans that he wore the mechanical chronometer, but you could see that there are changes. The date moves from 3 down to 6. The dial now is the Omega Wave, which came back for 2018 after a brief hiatus from 2012 to 17, but it's now ceramic and laser cut. Applique indices, 42 millimeter case instead of 41.5. We have a newly reprofiled helium escape valve now in a conical profile, and now you can open it underwater, something you could not do in the past. There's a ceramic insert with white enamel for contrast. The bezel itself has a wonderful detent. It's by far the easiest to turn of any Diver 300 meter I've experienced. Let's hear the older watch. It's louder, but it's not as refined. Now jumping back, we're charting the changes here. You can see the addition of a caliber 8800 55-hour master chronometer that is Métas chronometer certified, coaxial movement. Now you can see it features a full bridge with a free sprung balance for shock resistance, SI14 silicone hairspring for anti-magnetism. I'm trying to get a little bit more light. Sean's fighting the manual focus there. He's doing a great job keeping up here. And of course, the displayed caseback on a standard production Diver 300 meter was also an innovation. Now, you'll also note something that's subtle here, and that's that the bracelet is no longer rounded off on its shoulder lengths, giving it a more sporting appearance. It's still about 50 millimeters lug to lug and 13.7 millimeters thick, so you can see this is an easy watch to wear even if you've got that smaller wrist. Let me show you what I meant about the bracelet. You can see the original version of this bracelet featured rounded off edges, and you'll note that the rounded off edges on the original have a little bit of a dress watch character to them, whereas on the newer bracelet you can see they are sharply squared off. You can see the definition there and the strength that comes from the sharp break between the vertical and the horizontal of the bracelet. You'll also note that the bracelet now uses screws rather than pin sleeves. This is something that previously was not available on the Diver 300 meter watches. I'm going to deploy this one and this one still has its packing stickers on it. Okay, I'm not going to play with this one because it's still sealed, so that's sealed for your protection. But I will say that you could see internally, and I'm not going to break that seal, that you'll have the first pleasure. It features a push-button slider as well as an all-or-nothing fold-out extension. And that fold-out extension with the push-button slider was previously the exclusive domain of the Planet Oceans. So there's really no loss in functionality here. You're getting almost everything save the 600-meter depth of the Planet Ocean and the extra 5 hours of power reserve. That is the buy right there, and for under $4,000, it's hard to fault it. Now let's jump back to our high horology watches for a little bit and talk about the best of German watchmaking within the realm of Swatch. Now, Swatch probably needs to be reminded that it owns Glashütte Original, and the PanoGraph may be the unsung hero of East German chronograph tech, as this watch, launched 2 years after the original Pano retrograph, uses the same basic caliber 60. This is the caliber 6101, and it has the same flyback technology. It is still a column wheel lateral clutch chronograph and beautifully finished. You can see that it is of a different style and more open with rhodium plated brass bridges, not what you'd see on the Lange, and as a result it has more of a silver flash that we might associate with Swiss watches, but you'll also note that all of the standards are present and correct. It is still very much a modern German watch. 39 millimeters in diameter, 28 8-beat rate, stop seconds, quick set date, column wheel, lateral clutch, and of course the flyback functionality. You can really see the operation of the mechanism, and you can see that as with Lange, the full lateral clutch here is also jeweled, and they do use screw-fixed chiton for many of the pivots. So you have all that German watch design language right to the freehand engraved half bridge with the black polished swan's neck regulator. A truly special watch. You can see that it uses an unusual tri-spoke mechanism to register the 30 minutes as we jump from 0 to 10, and then 10 to 20, and then 20 to 30. There are just sweeping hands that ply these 3 tracks and make it easier to read than when you have one small circular chronograph register. And I'll show you exactly why that is. Take a look at the Omega, and you can see how hard it is to read the scale on this chronograph. I'm not saying it's a bad design, just it was designed with the best technology available in the 70s, the Valjoux 7750. That's not nearly as intuitive as the enormous scale used by Glashütte Original and the pointer system, the tri-spoke, that allows you to easily recognize those 3 immense sweeps of 10 minutes. And you can see that the little dimples make it quite easy to track. Now throw this one on the wrist. It's an easy watch to wear at 39 millimeters and only about 47 millimeters lug to lug. It's narrow across the wrist. So this is a great option if you want a traditionally sized men's dress complication in rose gold. You can see that the lugs are short cropped, and on both sides I have plenty of clearance. So I could recommend this watch for a wrist as small as 13 to 13.5 centimeters circumference. And once again, the case back very German, but not derivative of Lange. And I think there's a certain integrity that comes with doing things your own way instead of copying those who have already shown success. Note, it's also 5-position adjusted, which is the high horology standard, much like you would find on a chronometer. Sticking with our non-Swiss watchmaking for just a moment, let's talk a bit about a watch that is larger than life. Godzilla. No, not that Godzilla, and not that Godzilla Grand Seiko. This is the SPGC 229. This is the Grand Seiko Spring Drive 20th Anniversary Nissan GTR 50th Anniversary GMT Chronograph. Spring Drive GMT Chronograph. This is 46.4 millimeters in a combination of grade 5 titanium and blue ceramic. The core of the case, as you can see, is in titanium. So if you were to, in worst case scenario, shatter a piece of ceramic, you simply replace that piece of ceramic. So you get the lightness of a ceramic and tie case, the scratch resistance externally of ceramic, and the shatter resistance of titanium. Now this dial is exceptional, as all Grand Seiko dials are, but this one is more so because of its spectacular combination of a granular, almost media blasted silver base and blue accents, diamond polished and faceted applique indices, the same treatment rendered on the hands at center. You can see there's a 24-hour hand for the second time zone, constant seconds with a double scale. You can see it has 2 semicircles, one from 0 to 30, one from 30 to 60. You have your chronograph minutes and chronograph hours located adjacent to the date on the 3 o'clock side, and then your 3-day power reserve indicator down at 7 o'clock. The watch, of course, a limited edition of 200 pieces, features appropriately for a Nissan GTR inspired watch, a hot-rodded spring drive. This is the 9R96 caliber. Column wheel, vertical clutch, and you can see because of the gold medallion in the winding rotor, it features precision of plus or minus 10 seconds per month. By the way, you can see the column wheel interacting as it sets and resets the vertical clutch. Now the thing is, with the gold medallion here in GTR spec instead of the usual Grand Seiko Lion, you get plus or minus 10 seconds a month instead of the standard spring drive plus or minus 15. So it is substantively different inside. And of course, since 1969, Seiko and Grand Seiko chronographs have been vertical clutch and column wheel, 3-day power reserve, spring drive. You have that smooth sweep, and I'm going to activate the chronograph. Oh, it's already active. Let's get close, take a look so you can see that smooth spring drive sweep of the seconds hand. No stagger, no stutter, no stop, and no start. It moves continuously. A movement that I often say has mechanical soul but quartz precision. There is no battery, no capacitor, and no motor in this watch. All of the energy is derived from the spring potential energy inside the barrel. It took from 1977 to 1999 to bring that to market, and this watch was designed in 2019 to celebrate 20 years of spring drive alongside 50 years of Japan's legendary sports car, the GTR, sometimes known as the Skyline GTR, depending on its lineage. Best known as Japan's Corvette, it is so much more from a cultural standpoint. And this watch, 200 meters water resistant, full service, in lovely GTR-inspired Bayside blue and silver. A very impressive watch, though not quite as polyvalent as Jaeger LeCoultre's 2005 launch, the Master Compressor Extreme World Alarm. Now, I know you're dying to hear what this world alarm sounds like. Here it's hanging gong, which is free of the case. As a result, it has a wonderful ringing, sustained tone and lyrical musicality to it. You may also note that it has an on-off feature for the alarm, which is wonderfully handy if you want to keep the alarm wound and at the ready, but not cocked to go off uninvited. You can see that the on-off function is a rocker that sits adjacent to the red anodized world time reference ring adjuster. So you see how I can change my world time reference ring, and I can rotate it in either direction. Now for JLC, the index, or your current time or your current city, is going to be down at 6 o'clock. So that is where you will put your current city of reference. And I have to admit, I am not in Dhaka or Karachi. Let me adjust this one. I'm going to set it to Hong Kong, We have an office in Hong Kong, so I can at least claim that connection. Several degrees of separation. We're playing the Kevin Bacon game with regional offices. So if you're in Hong Kong, you will then be able to read next to each one of these 24 hours the time in all of the world's 24 principal time zones. You read your minutes at center, and then you read your hour adjacent to each of these cities, and that will give you your world time. So you can read all the world's time simultaneously. Now there's also a brilliant adjuster system for the alarm. It is a double digital, double wheel system, and this is the most precise JLC adjustment system I have found in the Memovox family from 1950 to present. 1950 was the original Memovox, and you can see how this one can be set precisely right to about 5 minutes. It's a fun system to play with, and you can see since this movement is based on the caliber 956, there is also a quick set for the date built in, something that all previous JLC alarm calibers did not have. Automatic winding, 100 meters water resistant. This watch is 46.3 millimeters with a shock resistant case. Some fans might remember when I took mine and threw it onto a carpeted floor to demonstrate its shock resistance. Rest assured, this isn't mine, and mine was fine. But it was said at the debut of this watch back in '05 that you could play golf with it, tennis, firearms marksmanship, even play the hammer game at a carnival. The watch can survive all of that because the outer case is in steel, the inner case is in titanium, and that titanium case, the inner case, which you can see is satin finished, contrast with the polished steel, it sits on spring shock absorbers internally, which is why this watch is so large. World time alarm, shock absorbers, and a quick release lug system that is probably the best such system ever invented, because you can use any standard width 22 millimeter strap rather than being tied to some sort of proprietary system. So that quick release strap system is another reason why this watch is purposefully as large as it is. You can quickly throw it on rubber, a bracelet, alligator, or calf. All options available, and again, aftermarket options work well too. That has always been an Achilles heel of quick release lug systems. This one does not have that weakness. Sticking with Jaeger LeCoultre, let us discuss the 2018 Polaris Chronograph. 42 millimeters in rose gold. This is the richest version of the reborn Polaris model line. A lovely gray anthracite dial featuring a frosted hour track and a sunburst center. You can also see there is a concentric circular guilloche or azurage on the sub-registers. So you get 1, 2, 3 different finishes, and then there's satin finish on the tachymeter scale outboard. As with the Nautilus, this doesn't actually have a constant seconds hand. You have your chronograph hours, minutes, and seconds, but because of the vertical clutch of the caliber 751, you can leave it running full time. 100 meters water resistant. This is a full service sports watch, and I should also mention that of the Polaris models, this and its rose gold brethren, there are a handful of them, are the only ones with gold winding rotors instead of tungsten. So a level of refinement here that you will not find on the standard models. 65-hour power reserve, 2 barrels, vertical clutch and column wheel, and as you can see on the wrist, it doesn't wear like a 42. The lugs are beautifully short cropped, and it's narrow across the wrist. Comfortable, low slung, close cut. This is a dress watch. Make no mistake, it has sports watch durability with its free sprung balance and its 100-meter case. All the same, this is an all-around watch that can be worn anytime with any attire under any circumstance. Another feature not universally found on the Polaris line, a full deployant clasp. Once again, this is considered to be a flagship piece in rose gold. So you get that rose gold rotor and you get the rose gold full deployant clasp, and I can tell you that both of them are worthwhile. A wonderfully rich watch that gives that PanoGraph from before a run for its money. Truly special, although I must say probably not the best value in chronograph on the table today. That would be this. This is the 2018 Tag Heuer Carrera Heuer 02T Tourbillon Chronograph Tête de Vipre. This is best known as the Carrera Tourbillon. Now, this is the Besançon Observatory Chronometer certified Tête de Vipre chronometer. So this is the head of the Viper, the symbol that is allocated to watches that pass the chronometer test, a fully cased up chronometer test, not bare movement, at the French Observatory of Besançon. 155 of these watches were made in a combination of blue ceramic and titanium, 45 millimeters, 155 pieces, designed to celebrate 55 years of the Carrera in 2018. Now you'll note it is a flying tourbillon. It does not have an upper bridge. Nothing is blocking that 1-minute tourbillon. It is a vertical clutch and a column wheel chronograph, which means you can have center seconds if you leave it running. Because of the vertical clutch, there's no additional hazard wear and tear to the mechanism. Automatic winding, you could see the movement is handsomely blacked out with a lovely blue metallic rotor. 100 meters water resistant, 155 pieces individually numbered, the 65-hour power reserve, the column wheel vertical clutch chronograph, the flying tourbillon on the dial side, Sean's going to show us that one more time, and the rare French Observatory chronometer certification. This is a very special watch, and because it's titanium and ceramic, not only is it highly scratch resistant, but it is also very light on the wrist. It features an Hublot-like hybrid leather and rubber strap. It wears quite easily, absolute comfort, and thinner than I would have expected. This is a timepiece that sits lightly and wears well. If you're thinking of buying an Hublot, don't bother. For under $15,000, this is the way to go. Refinement, precision, exclusivity, complication, value, and with the water resistance and the shock resistance, wear it all the time versatility. In blue and black, it even flies a little bit under the radar for something so large, while still supporting plenty of lume on the dial side to be legible, and abundantly so day or night. That is a very special watch. Then again, every Rolex is a very special watch, none more so than the one I'm about to show you. Launched for 2005 and discontinued after 2014, this is the Rolex Cellini Prince, named after the model that debuted back in 1928 at the height of Art Deco machine-age design. It's got a mid-century modern set of rayon or sunburst gadroons radiating out from its primary and subdial, and you can see the case all in white gold, has lovely fluted shoulders. Now you turn it over and the caliber 1740 is not just unusual in being a manual wind modern day Rolex chronometer, but this was the first ever Rolex with a display caseback to reach series production. 3-day power reserve, chronometer certified. You can see it features a movement finish that perfectly matches the dial, and that was a feature of all the Cellini Princes. Each dial was matched to the finish of its movement. You can see on the wrist, easy to wear. 13 centimeter circumference wrist, no problem. This one wears well, and one of the most compact wearing non-round watches I've encountered. Now let's talk about two Rolex sports watches, one of which is a Yacht-Master and one of which is a GMT, and both were significant firsts. In 1983, we got the GMT-16760, the first GMT-Master 2 with a true dual-time capability. It's a little bit thicker than the GMT-Master, and it earned the nickname Fat Lady. We're going to sidestep that pejorative and just call it its other nickname, the Sophia Loren, because it wears it well. Featuring the first ever Coke bezel. This timepiece was a first on several levels, as you have the 100-meter case with the sapphire crystal, the Coke bezel, the dual time capability. All of the modern features we associate with the GMT-Master 2 were online for this watch, and this is a late model, so 1987, one of the last of the 760s, a spectacular collector piece with a 78360 bracelet attached. I'm going to throw it on my wrist real quick so you get a sense of it. 40 millimeters in diameter. It wears pretty much like any other GMT, despite its reputation for being thicker. You're talking about maybe one millimeter, maybe half a millimeter. It's not something that's evident on the wrist. It wears modern, it wears comfortable, and it wears pre-super case. As you can see with all of the material in the lugs, still wonderfully full and shapely. This watch has been sparsely, if ever, refinished, and it's a wonderful window into not just Rolex's past, but also significantly Rolex's history, as that was a first ever. And the Yacht-Master Dark Rhodium, likewise. Now, not quite as revolutionary as the first GMT-Master 2, but probably the most attractive version of the original 40mm Yacht-Master. Dark Rhodium dial, platinum bidirectional Yachtsman's timing bezel. You have a sunburst dial with a wonderful metallic grain, and then you have that dark rhodium. Normally rhodium is going to be a silvery material that you see on movements. Here it looks more like gray ruthenium, and you have those lovely cyan accents that absolutely pop. You can see the case is not the super case profile, having more in common with the Daytona, the Datejust, and the Date-8 than it does with any of the GMT's subs or sea dwellers. Throw it on the wrist and it's everything you would expect. 100 meters water resistant, a certified chronometer, the classical Rolex 40mm profile, but lower on the wrist than a sub, as this one's under 12 millimeters thick and close coupled, the ultimate cuffable rotating bezel Rolex. It could be a dress watch, it could be a sports watch. It's got a little bit more heft because of the platinum and a little bit more grace and opulence too. But if you want a Rolex that combines opulence with daily driver practicality, you're going to want a precious metal President, and they don't come any other way. The President bracelet here in white gold, on the white gold, Rolex President by nickname, Rolex Date by birth. 36 millimeters with a spectacular fully loomed black lacquer dial. This is an all-arounder, being 100 meters water resistant, fully loomed, automatic, caliber 3155 inside, a certified chronometer, 48-hour power reserve, and as tough as the sub. It's a double quickset generation watch, and let's see, this is an F series, so this one's 2003. This model bowed back in 2000. That was this generation of Date. Easy to wear at 36 millimeters. You can see 44 millimeters lug to lug, so universally wearable. I'm not going to give you a lower limit wrist size here, as the watch effectively wears well on a wrist of any size. Very comfortable, stately, and with a loomed dial. Remember, not every Date has that, but with a loomed dial, this one truly is a do-it-all watch. And because of the solidity of a modern white gold Rolex with the center links, the end links, the clasp, it feels like any other brand's platinum watch. Now, quickly, a shout out to an Omega we don't often see. This was the more desirable of two year 2001 tributes to Michael Schumacher. This is the Speedmaster reduced Michael Schumacher Racing. 6,000 pieces, 39 millimeters in stainless steel with a lovely plexiglass. It was dedicated to his 2000 championship with Scuderia Ferrari, and you can see it features that evocative racing dial with the staggered hash marks on the scale outboard, as well as the combination of the red and the orange shocks. This dates back to the late 60s on the 145-12s and the 145-22s, and you can see that it continues here on the Speedy reduced case with a lovely combination of white, red, orange, and black. There is a silver dial version of this watch, but I happen to prefer the dark dial. To me, it has a bit more visual power and punch, and for a 39 millimeter watch, that's not a bad thing, as the watch has serious presence, stance, and gravitas without being oversized. Of course, the reputation of Michael Schumacher, 7-time world champion, including 5 times with Ferrari, it precedes him, and you can see that it features a simulacrum of his signature on the caseback. It is explicitly dedicated to the 7-time Weltmeister. Finally, where do we end an episode like this? We've had all 3 Langos. We've had the GTR. We've had precious metal watches and Geneva Hallmark. We've had Tourbillon chronograph, but they do not come any finer than 3 Hands by Carré Voutilainen. This is the Vingt-8, launched in 2011. This timepiece, white gold and 39 millimeters, features a Carré Voutilainen complement cadran manufacture dial featuring extravagant guilloche, and as you can see, a wonderful contrast between an anthracite gray clou de Paris and a checkerboard motif, a diminishing checkerboard motif with a lovely billowing rose lathe style sunburst down in the sub-seconds register. So you have 1, 2, 3 different guilloche present, and you can see the tonal contrast between the blue and the anthracite. Note the Voutilainen style hands, which feature double coloration. They're actually assembled from components to achieve this differentiated combination of shapes and colors. They are not made all of one piece. You'll also note that the characteristic Voutilainen claw lugs are present. Voutilainen rendering this watch in a wearable size at 39 millimeters, such that any wrist can enjoy it. On the back, it gets even better with the caliber Vingt-8, or the 28. So named because it was his 28th caliber designed. It features a double direct impulse escapement, an enormous oversized free-sprung balance with internal gold variable inertia, or I should say variable polar moment masses, a full specular finished balance bridge, black polished. Note the use of nickel anthracite coating on the Côte de Genève, as well as a solar spiral on the ratchet wheel atop the mainspring barrel. 65-hour power reserve and a beat rate of 18,000 vibrations per hour for the caliber 28. I'm going to wind this up, and you can see it spring to life. Let me draw it away so I'm not shaking in front of you and I can start it up quicker. This is a movement that surpasses all expectations. A big, slow-beating balance with an overcoil hairspring that's also free-sprung. This is poetry in motion, if ever there were such a thing. Sean's going to get nice, quick, close focus on that hairspring and the beating balance. Double direct impulse. You can see the twin escape wheels that only impulse the balance in its direction of travel to minimize parasitic losses and maximize power reserve. 65 hours, big, slow beat. It features a Phillips curve
on the overcoil, and then a Grossman inner curve where it joins with the collet of the balance. So it has a curve on both ends of the hairspring, Phillips and Grossman, to ensure concentric beating in any orientation with respect to gravity. And that, folks, is all she wrote, or should I say all he wrote. Kari Voutilainen, AHCI member, and of course, one of the great watchmakers of our time, underrated if anything, because he is not a self-promoter, and in any gathering of watchmakers, he will be the quietest man in the room. Humble, kind, generous with his time and his insights. He creates masterpieces, and this is one. tmosso, guys, at thewatchbox.com. If you want to own that carry, email me. tmosso at thewatchbox.com. You will receive a response within hours, I guarantee it. Prices in the description. Thanks to you, thanks to my crew. We are still improving this studio. Bear with me. Time out, Tim out. Thanks for logging on.